Right, here we go then. This is part 7 of 12. So we're slowly getting through these lectures. They are taking quite a while, but I want to make sure you've got all the basics in place before moving on to this more creative and faster stuff. So obviously after these first 12 we can do some more on the fly and quicker stuff. But let's get all the basics in place first, so you've got a good structure for moving forward. So yeah, part 7. This is going to be texturing, just an introduction into texturing. How to apply basic textures to a mesh. And it's part of the pipeline, and it's an important part. If you're working with game engines or films, things like that, or games and films are the two biggies really. You want a proper unwrapped texture map. Let's just set that. It always starts halfway down. I like to have the cube. I like to move it up. Let's make sure I've got screencast keys on down there. Got my Epic pen open. So yeah, introduction to texturing. I mean, these days a lot of people create textures in Substance Paint, so that's the go-to package. But you know, simple textures that can be created in Photoshop, and back in the day, you know, 10, 20 years ago, people exclusively just used Photoshop. So let's just fire up. I've got a simple version of Photoshop here, and this is just a few simple textures I created that we're going to apply. Just some basic stuff in the 2D package. That's based on a Jimmy Corti one, the guy from the KLF. A few young people won't remember Jimmy Corti, but like a rock dance band, the KLF. He's done some artwork, so yep, that's some basic textures created in Photoshop 2D on our 2D plane. So back in Blender, how do we go about applying these textures? Well, you want to start off with your viewport shading. So come out of grey mode and go into viewport shading. Next, you want to be in your material properties, and that's in your properties panel, which is one or if not the most important. So shading, properties panel. Let's name that cube. And what we can simply do to apply a texture, we click that little yellow dot and go to image texture, open. Let's just select texture. What's our texture for? Doesn't matter. There's our texture, but we've been naughty, haven't we there? We haven't followed the pipeline. So if we go into edit mode, A to select all, U to unwrap, cube projection. That's projected the texture on all of the faces. And that's a classic example of not following the correct pipeline there, what I've done. 1, unwrap. 2, apply your texture. 3, UV tweaks. We went straight to 2, didn't we? We should have started on 1. It's only a simple example, so it doesn't matter, but that's just showing you need to follow the correct pipeline. Unwrap it first. So that's a simple way of applying a texture to a cube. And if you click this folder, because we're already unwrapped, we can just reapply different texture. Again, we go into object mode, click the folder, click texture 1. That's another texture. So that's a basic way of getting a simple 2D texture onto your mesh. The important panel is your material and your base colour. And the most important one is your base colour. You've got different maps which you're going to go into, like metallic, roughness, alpha, normal. But your base colour is what I like to call your bread and butter, your main colour map. Just rub this out. So yeah, that's a basic texture onto a cube. But a lot of people now, they like to paint directly onto the 3D mesh. I mean, a lot of environment artists will create all the textures, for example, and then just map it on, do some tweaks. So they'll do a lot of texture painting in another package and then apply it. But if you're doing character stuff, a lot of people are painting on the actual mesh. Let's hide the camera and light. Let's go to add mesh, UV sphere. Let's move that up one. Control A, all transforms. So there's our sphere, our 2D map. But I always like to, I don't like to leave things at default, really. If we go to Edge, select Loops, Edge Loops, right click, Mark Scene, Base Mode, A to select all, Unwrap, Minimum Stretch. You've got our unwrapped mesh there. With not much stretching. Right click and shade smooth. So base colour is the most important. But another important panel in Blender is your texture paint. And if you're in layout mode, you can select it from the drop down here, texture paint. I'll just grab your texture paint, and when you're in texture paint mode, you get your different brushes down here, different settings there, strength, radius, which is F, different fall off, strokes, spacing. So if you're in texture paint, you want to make sure you've actually got a material there. So in your material, click New. Always try to rename stuff so you don't get lost with all the materials you got. Like sphere. And with texture paint, you'll need an actual image texture to paint onto. If you click your yellow dot there, image texture, just rub that out, it's in the way. Click New. We'll have it as, let's have it as 2K for now. 2K squared. New image. Let's name that Sphere Paint. So remember, you go into texture paint, you've got to have something to paint on, else you'll get an error down here. Let's close that area. So we've got our image texture there. This area is for selecting your colour. Always starts on black. Pink, I believe in Blender, if something's pink, it's missing a texture. If it's black, There's no paint on it yet. I believe that's correct. So it's black, so you've got no paint. So we've brought out colour up. Let's select, I don't know, let's go for a greenish colour. Airbrush. F to adjust brush size. Now you can simply paint on the 3D surface there. Directly painting onto our 3D mesh. And we've done that by entering texture paint there. Just cover the whole surface with a kind of sagey, kind of yellowy green colour. You can turn your overlay off as well if you don't want to see your wireframe. If you select another colour, F to resize your brush, you've got paint hard, so you could say dot, dot, F. Simple painting onto a 3D surface with a different brush. You've got paint soft, which makes it softer. If you go back to paint hard, for example, adjust your strength, less opacity. So, pretty cool texture paint. That's for like blurring. Notice how that's blurred it. Control Z to undo. But we'll go into the texture paint settings a bit more. I'm just giving you a very brief overview of texture paint in Blender. So that's how you paint onto a 3D mesh. Let's just have a bit of water, throat's a bit dry. Excuse me. So we've loaded the texture onto a mesh. We've done a little bit of painting onto a mesh. Airbrush, I believe, is a bit like a graffiti artist's kind of brush. Airbrushes. So yeah, the important panel there is your material properties. That's got all your info for your materials, textures. We're going to go more into that in the next lesson, the metallic and roughness and stuff in the materials and shading lesson. This is just a brief overview of the texturing process this is. So yeah, I mean, you've gone into creating the simple one in Photoshop and then the 3D painting. There's also a method called vertex paint in Blender. So let's go into, let's show our overlays there. Let's go into object mode. Let's hide our sphere. So let's, we better save it first. Let's go to part 7B. Save it in the right place. You can in Blender part 7B. Let's go to File, Append. I think it was 3B. Collection. Let's append our alien head there. We've got our alien head appended. And you'll notice with that, we go to stats. That's 741,000 polys, which is not mega high, but it's quite high. And vertex paint's used a lot when you're working with high poly meshes. And I believe it's used in grayscale shading a lot of the time. Vertex paint. So we've got I think that's named wrong. That should be head. That should be eye. They're very naughty there, not paying attention. So there's our head. So if we go into vertex paint, I don't think you have to create a material using vertex paint. Let's try that. Let's just select a greenish colour and paint. Yeah, vertex paint, as I say, it's used in grey mode, and it's done for, I suppose, just simple concepting really. So you're just painting directly onto the vertices. See, basically the same as the same, but a little bit less involved than texture paint, because it's just straight up paint. Basically, select vertex paint and off you go. And you've got the same kind of tools available. And you can paint hard there, and you can select your symmetry if you have to resize your brush. So yeah, that's a simple vertex paint. That is. That's how it works. And you can do simple concept renders. That's your vertex paint. I believe you can obviously create a texture, but you haven't got to. And I think it's a color attribute. Yeah, color attributes, color. So you can plug that in your shading editor. You can plug that in there. We'll go into that in the next lesson. So that's your vertex paint. Basically the same as texture paint, but a little bit less involved. Oh, he's got chicken pox. I mentioned that. So yeah, that's vertex paint. That's another texturing technique. But let's go a bit further in depth into this, into texturing editors. So let's hide that collection for now. What did we have? We had a cube and a sphere, didn't we? Ah, it's hiding. That's what. Move that to there. So let's go to texture paint. So we've selected texture paint now from this main window panel there. And by doing that, it gives you your 2D editor there. Don't know why I'm using the mouse. And your 3D editor there. And that's texture paint. So what you can do with that, let's make this a different colour to the cube. It's not the same. Let's grab our airbrush and paint all over that. You can see that as we're applying paint in the 3D viewport on the right, it's also updating on the left in our image editor. So we're painting in the right, it's updating there. And you can see that that is the image editor. you'll switch between image editor and UV editor when you're in texture paint mode a lot. And when you're in the image editor mode, you've got view, mask and paint. A lot of the time you'll just use paint there. If you're wondering sometimes you'll think, hang on, why can't I paint or do this and that, are you? It's because you're not in paint mode, so you need to be in paint mode. N to bring up your settings, and T. So N for right, T for left. Same as in the 3D viewport when you're bringing stuff up. The same in all panels, I believe. T and N. And you can select, same as basically there, you can select your colours there as well. But yeah, pretty useful. I like to hide in. It's out the way. It brings up more settings that. So you've got your red cube there. Just select a blue. You got your brushes down here. I was showing you before. F to resize. Strength settings here. And there you go, you're just painting on the surface. And obviously, as I've said, you can paint on your surface in your 2D view as well. You might want to knock your strength down. If you're doing a character, for example, you'd want subtle red parts. Like around the eyes, for example, so you can knock your strength down and draw. Like that. It's a visual thing really, whatever you're looking to achieve. But yeah, that's texture paint at its basics. And obviously, as I said, there's more tools available. So if you paint that there, you might want to blur that. And you're just blurring around it. There's your blur brush. No, it's not Diamond Albarn. The blur brush. Any worse. Smear. Just smearing paint. And obviously, more strength. More of a smear. Less strength. Less of a smear. Clone. If you hold Alt and click an area, then click your clone part. So if you hold Alt and do the blue, then draw there. Alt. No, sorry, I'm thinking of ZBrush. It's Control, sorry. You have to Control click. Control click the red. Clone the red. Good ones, fill. Very useful. Just fills the whole sphere with a selected colour. Mask and annotate. So if you want to make a note. Note. Follow. Pipeline. It can be useful for animation. I know this is texture editing, but I find it useful if you're animating stuff to leave a few notes. The annotate. Brush. So yeah, that's work that out. That's the basic overview of texture paint panel. And you can obviously switch between your different excuse me, knock the microphone there. Switch between your different meshes. Obviously if you select your cube there, you want to select the texture there. And like I say, you'll go into your UV editor as well when you're in texture paint if you wanted to tweak a position of something. So you might want to, for example, select that face of the cube. You may want to, if we control L, you might want to move the face around in that cube face, for example. I was just hitting control. If you select that face there, the other one, you can go into face select there. Move different faces around. You might want to do that. So that's the very basics of texturing. What we can do now, if we hide the cube and the sphere, file, append, Minecraft character. There he is waving. Now let's hide the rig, hide the arm, leg, torso. There's our head. So what we want to do, let's create a new material. Alex head. I believe the character I'm going to base it on is Alex from Minecraft. So there's the head material. Let's go into image texture. Call it Alex. Let's have it as 2K. 2K. We left it as black, which is wrong, so let's go into texture paint. The default base colour, the skin. Something along the lines of that. Go to fill it. UV editor, image editor. And it's not wrapped 100% by the looks of it, but we should have it like unwrapped with an eye there and an eye here, but I think we only probably unwrapped the arm. But we're only showing the basics, so that doesn't matter for now. So there's our base skin. And then what we want to do now is he's got gingerish type here. Let's choose a orange there. Let's grab our brush. And what we've got there, if we go into our active tool, we can see that we've got stroke. It's usually on dots, I believe, as default. What we've done, we've set it to line. What we can do with that now, we can get a straight line. Like that. not straight line. I believe he's here comes sort of down to around there. Something along the lines of that. Let's go back to dots and just fill this in. There's his very basic hair. It's on the top as well. And you got to be careful of there. You've got back face culling on, but sometimes it paints through for some reason. So he's painted through there. Options, back face culling. That's on. Include. Not sure of that one. It shouldn't be painting the front, that shouldn't. So there's a basic hair. Now, we want these eyes white. Now, let's select a white colour. Start painting the eyes there. So because we low res, it's painting into the other part, you see that, heavy painting, and we don't want that. So what we can do there, a little trick, is if we go into edit mode, we want to make sure we're on basis so we can see it. We can hit A and then deselect by holding shift, the two eyes, and then click H, and you've only got your eyes available. But when you go into texture paint, you're only painting on your eyes. So when you now come out, you go back into edit mode and click Alt H to show everything in texture paint. You'll see you've only painted on your eyes. So what's next? Again, select all, deselect the mouth, H, go into texture paint, just your mouth there now. So we want a pinky kind of colour, something like that, maybe a bit darker. Something like that. If we go into edit mode, Alt H shows all of it. And you need pupils as well. So what we want to do, edit again, I to select all, deselect those two, click H. He's got green eyes, I believe. Go back into texture paint, select a green. And then we want go into our active tool. We want to make sure we're on line Right. Something like that. And put the eye. Same on the other side. It's a touch bigger, but doesn't matter. Bit of contrast. So there's the eyes. Hair looks a bit not too great, but what we could do, we into texture paint, edit mode, Alt H. Let's try and clone, hold Control and we'll clone that. And let's really go in there with hard paint, knock that down. Where are we? Clone, yeah. Control. Just try and tidy that up along there. For some reason, it's not selecting the skin. Yeah. You should be able to colour pick that. There you go, colour pick. It's still not. D0AF. Doesn't look like the colours match, does it there? Not sure why. You're picking the colour, he's painting it darker for some reason. So I'll tidy that up a bit. Don't know why it's painting it dark. You should be able to pick that colour with that. And then paint it. Let's just leave that for now. So that's a basic way how you go around painting on the mesh, that is. That's just annoying me why it's not picking that colour. Can we clone it? Sorry. Clone. Control click. Clone. Control click. Control click to clone. That seems to be cloning the colour. Clone. That's a bit annoying, that, isn't it? But yeah, a lot of people use different packages. It's not the greatest blender for painting textures, but you know, we all love Blender and I do. But the painting tools are a little bit not perfect. I'm going to tidy that up myself before we get that into a render. So that's a basic way of painting a texture. And what we'll do in the next lesson, we'll probably go about assigning them via, you can assign it to different faces here by creating a material in a material kind of thing. So we'll show that in the next lesson for sure. This was just to show it with a full texture overall, basically. We will texture for the rest of the character in the next lesson. So we'll do, have a look, we'll do the arms and the body and stuff. And tidy up this texture as well for the head. So that's just a basic overview of let's just shift this cursor to world origin. I like the cursor to be down the bottom. That's just a basic overview of texture. Texture painting, that isn't a texture paint interface. In Blender. This is your active tool. If you're using texture paint. That's an important panel, that. Active tool. Yeah, it went a bit buggy then, Blender, for some reason. So let's just go through a few other settings. So yeah, tool there. That works on your active tool. So we seen line, didn't we? We've also got drag dots. You can just drag the dot. Dots is what you'll use pretty much a lot. Curve, not 100% what curve is, to be honest. I'm not sure on curve. Spacing. We've got line and we just the spacing. It's giving us space in between. And there is a, I think it's stabilised stroke. It gives you a line there. It's a bit like I can't remember that setting in ZBrush. Like lazy mouse, yeah, it gives you like a line so you can see more clearly what you're dragging. Yeah, stabilised stroke. Fall off is. You can have some smooth or rough. I think smooth generally the one to keep it on there. So yeah, various options there in your brush settings. And I think we've gone through all this really, the kind of brush. The different brushes at the bottom. The different strengths. Blur and paint, and obviously you could have some cheeks, couldn't they? Like rosy cheeks kind of thing. And then yeah, we'll just finish off by just discussing another couple of texturing things. So for example, we're going to discuss it more in the materials and shading in the next lesson, but if you go to your shading editor and you hit new, that will create your BSDF default material. So you can do things like, if you click Shift A and go to texture, brick texture for example, plug that into your base. Let's give you bricks. And if you hit Control T, say scale, I don't know, 0.25. That's a brick texture, sorry. And this is basically known as a procedural texture in Blender. like a math generated texture. If you right click and control, you can cut that. Go to Shift I, add a texture, Voronoi texture, plug that in, colour to colour, yellow to yellow. It's like another kind of texture. Control T to add a mapping node. Just shift that, not out the way. Put the scale as 5 or 0.5. That's like a Voronoi texture. There's all different procedural textures as well, like that, available in Blender. Or you can also just simply, if you go to New, there, Base Colour, Image Texture. We're going to go more into the shader editor next, but if you go to Open, what's it, Texture 6? Yeah, that's like a wood texture, so. If you go back into Layout, that's like a wood texture you've applied. So if you simply go into Edit Mode, part of in Vertex Mode for some reason, Unwrap, Cube Projection. So you've got wood there, haven't you? That's what she says. So you got a wooden texture applied. So that's the basics really of texturing in Blender. You can apply your texture from a file, which we've done there. You can apply your texture from procedural, which is there, or you can paint your texture. Like we did with that cube here, we created that in our 2D package and we assigned the cube projection and edited it. So painting, applying a texture and assigning a procedural texture. What we'll do in the next lesson, we'll explore that more, procedurals, materials and shaders, and we'll fully texture this. We'll probably do a bit of texturing on R2D2 as well. And that's the base colour, what we've got here. You've got normal maps, roughness maps, metallic maps, specular maps, alpha maps. But the core for texturing is your base colour, which is obviously this, your colour map. Right, so just before we finish, I just want to go back because I've missed a couple of little things on this texturing. So apologies, it's been a little bit messy this lesson, but a couple of little things I've missed which are quite important. It's quite a new feature this, it's called masking. So we went through these other blur, smear and that, but I didn't really go through this mask option. So if you click mask there, you can then select stencil mask and click new. Let's just call that mask, new image. And what you can do, if you don't want to paint on a certain part, you can knock your strength up to 1, it's best to. And you can paint out that part. But when you go into texture paint mode, the paintbrush, you can hit control to, like with most brushes, to go back over it and deselect. So say if you wanted to not paint on this section, for example, when you're painting this character, You've created a mask, haven't you, there? So when you now go into paint mode, let's just select a hard brush. So you're painting, but you're missing out the mask area because you've created a mask. So that's quite useful, that is. But it is more useful on high poly stuff. Like I say, with this low poly stuff, it's awkward to get into certain areas. But that's another decent little tool in your armoury, that is. If you want to mask out a certain part. You go into object mode, and you can see, because you mask that area out, you're not painting on it. And if you want to get rid of it, you simply click X and you can just paint as normal then. So that's one thing I wanted to cover that I missed, which is quite important, masking. Another thing was, if you go into sculpt mode, you've got tools on the left here. There's another mask there as well. But the one I wanted to show you is this paint. So it creates a new, you'll usually do it from scratch when you're painting. So it goes over what you've already got. But as I say, most of the time you'll do it from scratch, but this paintbrush, you can simply paint in sculpt mode. So let's, for example, select this arm. Let's go into sculpt mode. And let's paint. And it's not the best because it's low poly. You can see that in sculpt mode you've got this nice little brush here for painting. So that's just a couple of little things I missed out that are quite important. Remember, if you click Alt Q, that selects a different mesh. Alt Q, you'll select the body. So yeah, that's painting in sculpt mode. That is pretty useful, mainly for high poly stuff. Oh yeah, a couple of little other little nuggets I forgot there for you. So that's the end of this lesson. It's been a bit messy in parts. We'll polish this up a bit, make it a bit better. That's the basics of texturing in Blender. So I'll see you next time, guys. Cheers. Bye.